Brian, welcome to the campfire, my friend.
Hey, thanks for having me.
It is really cool to actually connect with a fellow Michigander,
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, we just realized we're about 3 hours away from each other.
which is cool. It's an opportunity to not only talk about the beauty of our state, but it's also a beautiful way to segue into your amazing journey.
Yeah, it's been quite a journey in my life, and I'll tell you one of the greatest healing aspects of my journey at this point in life is being out in nature, which is what I think is so cool about your campfire and where you are, because that's one of my greatest release valves is being able to just be out in nature. I live on 7.5 acres just north of Traverse City in Michigan, and so it's moving here was great for my mental health.
It's cool because there's so many similarities. My healing journey, it thrusts me back into the wilderness. I've always hunted, I've always fished and all those sort of things, but being in the situation that I was in, it brought me to develop this new perception of coming outside. And through that, I learned how to heal and, not only connect with nature in a different way, but also connect to myself.
Yeah, absolutely.
So let's talk a little bit about this amazing journey and story that you're living. Talk to me a little bit about the background.
Yeah, I was born and raised in Southern Michigan in Jackson, if you know where that is. And
Oh,
yeah, lived there until I was about 15, moved to South Florida, finished out high school. I went in the army in 2003, right upon graduation. And that was obviously post 9/11, a couple years, and just felt like, I was supposed to do that with my life. So I joined Army infantry and spent my first year in South Korea with the 2nd Infantry Division, and then came back, got assigned to the 10th Mountain Division. I was a team leader in an infantry platoon and got sent to Afghanistan in March of '06. And to give you kind of the short version rundown, I we arrived in mid March of '06. My first vehicle that got blown up was April 18th of 2006. We ran over a double stack of anti-tank mines that were buried in the road in the Arghandab Valley. Nobody died, but two of my guys were injured. They both returned to duty a month later, thankfully. And then a couple months later, on July 24th of 2006, I was in the front passenger seat of the lead vehicle. I was a truck commander in the lead vehicle of about a 15 vehicle convoy that was going through Kandahar, and we got about 2 miles from the main gate to Kandahar Airfield, which was our destination. And out of nowhere, a minivan being driven by a suicide bomber got right up next to my door and crashed into my door and exploded. And he blew himself and his van into about a billion pieces right there in the middle of the street. It was about lunchtime on July 24th, and I woke up laying in a ditch on the side of Highway 1. Had no idea where I was. My face was burned 2nd degree. My neck was 2nd degree, which is healed now. My hands were full thickness 3rd degree burns. I did sort of a push up. Once I woke up, it was kind of like I thought, why would I go to sleep here? Because I didn't remember laying down there. I thought, why am I laying here? I don't remember laying down. Then I thought, well, shit, are we in a firefight? But nobody was shooting. Then I realized I couldn't find my weapon because it was still in the vehicle. And so I did sort of a push up, got to my feet, walked around, trying to get my bearings, figure out what's going on. There's, car parts and body parts just everywhere. And my medic, who was my driver, thankfully, he was a medic and thankfully uninjured. He was attending to my gunner, who got severely injured as well. And within about 30 minutes, the medevac helicopters came. They got us, and they got me back to Kandahar Airfield. And within 3 days, I was in San Antonio, Texas, at Brooke Army Medical Center, where I stayed for the next year and 2 months recovering.
well, before we go any further, I got to thank you for your service, without a
Oh,
doubt.
oh, thank you.
I think that it's a very noble thing to go to that extent, to believe in your freedom, and so much that you're willing to put your life on the line to protect it for not only yourself, but for every other member of the country. So thank you very much for that.
Yeah, you know, and a big part of my incentive was, 9/11 had just happened, and obviously something like that happening, you obviously can't just sit back and let it happen again. You have to do something. And so, that was a big part of my incentive, to join.
It's finding motivations like that. And I mean, there's the heroic aspect of what you did, but then there's also the day-to-day inspirative side of that. Because you talked about your motivation being you can't just sit down and let that happen again. It's something that we all face in our lives, but not all of us take that sort of mentality where we grab the reins and we actually take action to change the future.
Yeah, everybody has their place in life. Everyone has their calling. Everyone has their strengths. Everyone has, the thing they feel like they're supposed to do. And for me, that was for that next few years of my life. That was what I felt led to do. If things aligned, it was right. It worked. My desire was there. And, not everybody is cut out to be in the military or to do that kind of work. And there's other kinds of work that I am definitely not, cut out to do. I need I want a nerd doing my taxes and a perfectionist. Not because I'm dishonest, but because I'm not that organized. I can kick in some doors and fight some people, and I can talk and speak and do some stuff. But when it comes to things like that, that just isn't my place. And so, I'm best in one place, not another, just as everyone else kind of is. But we all have a place in the world. We all have things we can do. We all have talents, gifts, abilities, skill sets, and we all have the ability to become better every day if we choose. And so, yeah, I'm certainly not better than anybody because I joined during that time. A lot of people did, but other people are making our country and our world a better place because of the fact I think they did not join the military because they are their best and highest use. I think is probably the direction maybe they went.
It's a struggle that we all have to face finding our calling in life. But along with the struggle of getting there, we also have to learn how to open our heart to whatever it is that we're called to do and make the conscious decision to really dive in head first. And, I can imagine that at that stage, there was a lot of, you know, re- excitement, but there was also a lot of apprehension because let's face it, with the line of work that you were going to do has the potential to be terminal.
Yeah, yeah. I knew full well going in what I was facing. I mean, I joined Army infantry during a time of war. I didn't get brainwashed or anything like that. Some people say, "Oh, you were too young. You didn't know what you were doing." No, I knew exactly what I was doing. I went in with eyes wide open, and people even say things sometimes. They'll say, "Well, do you blame the suicide bomber for how badly you got hurt? Like, do you blame him for your injury?" I say yes, but only 50%. Because he certainly had his part in it. But the other part was I joined infantry during a time of war, and I placed myself voluntarily in a position, in a country, in a role that had a high potential of extreme injury or death. And so, I blame him and I blame myself. We share 50-50 responsibility. I did my piece and he did his. I'm still here. So, yeah, but I've never had any issue with that either, though.
That's an interesting point because a lot of us go through life where we experience whatever the trauma may be to the intensity that we perceive it, and we like to place blame. We don't look at the fact that we were just as much an active part of that, and let alone the fact that obviously you came out on the better side of that. So there's a lot to really unpack and comprehend there that I feel like if more people took the time to look at the things that they've been through and realize that it was an active decision that brought you there, it really removes the victim mindset a lot easier.
Well, the thing about it is that people often don't like to own certain things that they ought to, maybe how they contributed to something. But the real there's power in that though, because you give away your power if you're not willing to take any responsibility. But that's only if you truly had some sort of responsibility. If you're walking down the street and you're a lady and it's night and some guy attacks you and violates you and assaults you, you didn't have any hand in that. You were wrong place, wrong time. It's not like you were like, hey, I'm actively going to go into a bad neighborhood and walk up and down that street until something bad happens and then complain that something bad happened. So that isn't always the case, but I think more often than not, if we want to look at it with real personal integrity, a lot of the bad things we go through in life, we did contribute to ourselves being there in some way. And again, maybe you weren't the one that, you know, enacted the thing that happened that hurt you. Obviously, that's not what I'm saying. But if you can take some sort of percentage of responsibility and go, oh, I I can see how I put myself in that position, or maybe how this decision led to that and that, which led me there. The thing is, if you can do that with integrity, don't, I'm not asking anyone to admit they had something to do with something that happened to to themselves if they didn't. That's a different story. But the more you can own of your own situation, the more power you have to change it after the fact. Me, I could be sitting around and I could be popping pills the rest of my life, antidepressants, things like that. I have friends just like me who have been taking 20, 30 pills a day for the past 15 years since coming home. They're still on them. They're sitting around, they're doing nothing with their life. I get it. It's a struggle. We all have stuff, but when you own the shit you go through to the greatest extent you can honestly do so, you have the most power to get yourself out of that position and move forward beyond it. But if a lot of people they won't own any bit of it, if they have something to own, then they you often see those people stay stuck. And even if you can't own anything of what happened to you, let's say something tragic or traumatic happened, if you do not contribute to that, I feel for you in the same way. But also, you are responsible after a time to get off your ass and start moving forward again. To look and go, okay, I don't want to be here. What's a plan? What's a way I can get out of this? Maybe I should go talk to somebody, a therapist, a life coach, a business coach, somebody who can help me chart a course and start taking baby steps out of where I am. My whole thing is this: you can go through the worst shit when you're a kid, and it can affect you into adulthood. But here's my deal. Once you're 30 years old, it's your fucking fault from there. Like, if you're 30 or older, you've had enough time to go, okay, got through the high school, the college phase, the post college phase, military phase. And it's like, you're a big boy now. You're a big girl now. Like, you're 30. It's not like you're 21. And you're still kind of young and dumb and you don't know much because you're young. Once you're 30, I don't have a lot of mercy for people over 30 who aren't getting their shit together because you know enough by 30, of what you ought to be doing. And so I try to help, but some people get it, some don't. Again, I'm very compassionate, contrary to how that may sound my last statement, but the best people who ever helped me are the people who are willing to kick me in the ass and go, dude, like you had your time of bitching, your time of complaining about it, recovering, saying what the hell just happened, trying to get your bearings about you. There is a time for that. It just can't last 15 years. And so eventually you have to go, all right, moving forward. And that helps a lot, when you have somebody or a group of people that can help you do that.
See, that speaks beautifully to the transition from the victim story to the hero's journey. Because at the beginning of every hero's journey, you've got that moment where you just got your ass handed to you. You're going through some of the most difficult things in the world. And, with the extreme form of the metaphor, every time that you got in the car after that, you could have said, I can't do this because it's going to blow up. As unlogical as that is in your head in the everyday world, it's a point of a trauma that happened. We build that crazy scenario and story around that point that triggered the pain to protect
Absolutely.
ourselves. But when you transition out of the victim aspect of it and realize that that was just one event, And there's something in there that I can learn. There's something in there that I can take away and hone in order to achieve whatever it is that my purpose has put me here to achieve. That's where it starts to make its own gravy. That's where it starts to build and build and build. And ultimately, just like the box on the screen with you learn how to use your story to become your voice and to become the fuel to further that hero journey.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there comes a point where you have to look at it and go, all right, what can I do with this? Or, what's the way around it? Or what can I do with it? What have I learned through it? Yeah, I mean, the one of the greatest healing aspects for me was when I had the opportunity to share some things that I learned through this experience, and I saw the effect it had on people. First time I ever shared, my mentor, the guy who eventually became my mentor, he pulled me up on stage in front of 3,000 people. I had never spoken before. I was still in burn bandages. And I spoke for 2 minutes and said, yeah, I got blown up. Guess I'm still here for a reason. Go for it. Probably the worst motivational speech you'll ever hear. But after I got off stage, this young lady came up to me and she told me about how she was raped and molested growing up and through her teen years as well. And she was in her mid 20s at the time, how her boyfriend had broken up with her and he was abusive. And she told me that 2 weeks prior, to us meeting, that she had tried to kill herself and failed. She failed suicide. And she said, Brian, but she said she ended it with this. She said, but if you can get through all of that in Afghanistan and that injury and stuff, I think I can get through this. I'll find a way. And thanks for being here today. See that right there helped me, and I helped her, and I didn't even have any answers. But something I learned, I tell you that story to make the point that I learned things through the experience. I had my eyes open enough and I was willing enough to see things and learn them along the way, even while going through the hell still. Because a lot of people want to close their eyes, bury their head in the sand, you know, being too close to your own situation, it can blind you temporarily. You are too close to it. You can't see the full big picture. That happens. I call that the fog of war. But if you are open-minded through all of it, you're willing to see possibilities where you don't know they are, but you're open to seeing them. You'll see a lot more possibilities and options in your life, and you'll learn more things rather than just being stuck in your head and so mad about what happened, and you just can't get past the fact that whatever happened happened. I mean, the guy who mentored me taught me how to do what I do now. I mean, it changed not just my life. Meeting that guy transformed my family tree. Like, my kids have a better life now because I met that one guy. And you know what? Whether or not I was willing to listen to him or take him up on his offer to train me on how to use my story and do good in the world with it, whether or not I was willing and open, he still would have shown up at Brooke Army Medical Center that day. He still would have given his speech. He still would have walked right in front of me. But my life would be completely different right now if I was not open to possibilities that I did not know existed. Because I mean, they things like that walk in front of us every day, and if we're open to seeing them, oftentimes we see them, and sometimes we're closed minded or we're distracted by something else, and we completely miss out on it, and then we never know what we actually would have missed out on. I can't imagine missing out on the life I have now and what I get to do and knowing I missed out on it. That would be just like I wouldn't even want. I don't know if I'd want to live. Just knowing how painful it would be to know I couldn't. I could have lived the life I have now or better, and I didn't because I was closed minded. And so I always encourage people. I know what you're going through is bad, but keep your mind open, keep your eyes open. You don't know what's right around the next corner or how close that next corner is.
It's funny because as I'm listening, I envision you speaking to the me of maybe 6 to 8 months ago, where I had taken a course over the few years leading up to it, based off of my traumatic experiences that I perceived, and chose to severely self isolate. I pretty much I sat in a tent, and that was all I did. and I still had the podcast. I was still working through things, being an active participant as much as I was capable of doing at the time. And now here we are having this conversation instead of hiding in a tent, sitting in front of a campfire. And these are the kind of things that, as you started that with sharing that beautiful story about the encouragement of just seeing you there. These are the things that, as a tribe, when we, and as a society, even when we use our stories, we inspire people in such a roundabout way that what we perceive as something is totally different than what they perceive. But they get that motivation that they need. With myself, I see it all the time. I go through and I talk to people that are struggling with something that's so far away from the path that I came down. But because I've opened up and I've shared my story and the things that I've experienced and how I've gotten through them, it's helped catapult them to the next level.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing how we rub off on each other. And, like energetically, like there are some people I've met where I didn't even know the person yet. And when they walked in the room felt different. There's one guy in particular. His name's Bob Goff. He lives out in San Diego. I've met him a few times and hung out at his house one day. And that's like one person who he's such a happy, encouraging, I mean, just an incredible human. And you can be like having a bad day. That guy walks in the room, suddenly the whole feel of the room changes. I can't even explain it. It's like somehow things are going to be okay. And that's probably the only person I've ever met in person where that's ever been the case. But it can go the other way too. And so I mean, there are mindsets, but there's also who we get around. And sometimes you can be so deep in a pit. And if you just get an ounce of encouragement, like real genuine motivation, encouragement for where you are, you get that burst of, you know, encouragement there of okay, that little burst of motivation that can last you. It might only take a moment to happen, but it can last you the next 10 days or the next 5 weeks before it starts to fizzle out. Well, when you start trying to find those little things that can encourage you by being a constant learner with an open mind, all those little things add up and they help you propel forward more and more. And it helps you to not get stuck where you are and to stay there. And nowadays with YouTube and online, yeah, there's a lot of trash on the internet, but there's a lot of great information, a lot of really good, genuine stories of people who have been through things and what they learned that you can look at your life and say, you know what, that applies to me. And then you just apply it to your life and it keeps you going for a little longer. It's kind of like that fire you're sitting in front of right now. That fire is going to turn into embers. The flames are going to go out eventually. But if you get a little bit of wind down those embers, just enough, man, that fire reignites. And then if you throw some gas on it, well, lighter fluid is safer. But if you do throw some gas on it, run, number one. But number two, that thing ignites and it will burn longer for a time and bigger for a time. And it's the same way with how we think.
That's a beautiful metaphor. I really developed this idea based off of well, more so off of the words of Marcus Aurelius, how he talked about the cycle of a fire and the fact that at its strongest point, it gets there by consuming everything around it, by finding energy, pulling it in. And then when it bends over and it dances around like this, it's because the oxygen is pulling it around to continue to support it. And I think that works in so many different ways within our course of our lives where we're struggling. Um, we need to find that next source of energy to pull ourselves together to get back up. And when I look at a fire like this, where I had people around the fire to do a session, these are the kind of things that really that really showcase themselves based off of the metaphor. And I think metaphors is such a beautiful way of life, whether they're spoken or they're visual like this, because it helps you to connect the pieces. You connect the dots a lot easier.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you also mentioned in there a lot about mindset. Mindset is a huge part of the game. So I want to talk a little bit about the transition period of going from the front lines, having just survived that terrorist, you know, that suicidal bomber, to where you're at now, where you're using your story. You've developed this new mindset in order to empower and help other people.
Yeah, I found very early on because, when my mentor put me on that stage, I had only been home from Afghanistan, I think 6 or 7 months. It wasn't long. And so I didn't have a whole lot of time to really get down on myself. I'm naturally kind of a more optimistic person. And if I'm not, I have my inner drill sergeant that'll just like, well, stop being a little wuss and, to put it censored wise on here, uh, just go do something. Um, Again, like I said, one of the big things that really changed my life was when I realized that my pain had value, and everybody's pain has value, and the value comes from how your pain can help somebody else, because everybody's trying to win a battle in their lives. Everyone's going through something, and so when you realize that the lessons you learned or are learning can apply to other people's lives, and you get a taste of what it's like to have someone tell you, "I'm not gonna go home and kill myself today because you were here talking and you believe in your thing and you can make it." Well, I just bought your belief too. Even when I didn't believe in me, I'm gonna believe in your belief in me instead until I can get mine back. Because sometimes we do that. Sometimes we share someone else's belief about us that's way better than our own because they're not affected by the circumstances we're in, but they know different things and ways out. And so, I mean, the fact that I realized early on my pain had value, it also gave the fact that it had value gave it meaning. Viktor Frankl, who survived the Nazi prison camps in World War II, and he was an Austrian Jew, a psychiatrist, brilliant man. He got out, he survived it, and afterwards, in his book Man's Search for Meaning, one of the best books ever written, ever. Man's Search for Meaning. If you haven't read it, go get it. You can read it in an afternoon. It's one of the most powerful books ever written. He said, when it comes to suffering, in that book, he said, in some ways, suffering ceases to be suffering at the moment it finds a meaning. In some ways, suffering ceases to be suffering at the moment it finds a meaning. Well, I didn't know for years what really, really set my fire ablaze, my inner drive to go share my story, not just talk about myself, but like what I learned. And I didn't know that for, gosh, it was probably 5 or 6 years after becoming a speaker that I found that book, and I found that when I couldn't explain it in 1,000 words, Viktor Frankl said it in 1 sentence about what happened to me when I met that young lady the first time I got on stage. My suffering suddenly had meaning. It helped somebody. So, if you're going through something, if somebody listening to this is going through something, there is value in what you're going through, not just for you, but for other people. They can draw strength from it. And even though it doesn't take away the pain in the moment necessarily, it can change your mindset because, your suffering is now not just suffering, it's suffering with a meaning. So it is by definition something now different because it has a deviation of maybe 1 degree. It's not exactly the same as it was before. And so I just happened to find that sharing my story and the lessons I learned helped people. It became addicting, and I loved it. It gave great meaning to my life. And another thing Viktor Frankl said was that he talked about the people being in a state of despair, and despair, by textbook definition, is basically a complete loss of hope. And Viktor Frankl said that despair is suffering without meaning. And I think that's where a lot of people are in life right now. They're suffering, but it's not for a cause they believe in, or they don't have any rhyme or reason for what they're going through. Now, I did discover meaning by chance when I met that young lady when I spoke. But I've learned I can also create meaning. I can go out, I can say, you know what? here are 3 problems I'm really good at working with and solving because I've had to overcome them in my life. And then go find people who are dealing with that and go help them, teach them in whatever way I choose to. Now I'm getting a sense of meaning, but I created that. I did that. And so that's something anybody can do. Like sometimes lightning strikes. It did for me when I met Dave, my original mentor. But, maybe, you're like, well, I don't want to wait around for lightning to strike because, it doesn't always, but it can. But also, you can go create meaning from the suffering or the struggle you've been through by helping other people with what you've learned.
I think you actually hit the nail right on the head there, and that's some of the greatest advice is, you know, change the perception of what it is that you're going through. If it hurts, it only hurts because you're choosing to allow it. Like Marcus Aurelius wrote in Meditations, if the cucumber is bitter, spit it out. You don't have to hold it in your mouth and chew it. You don't have to endure it. You still have the power to have a decision that you're able to make based on all the sudden circumstances that you're going through. If a change needs to be made, there's still resources within that environment around you that you haven't tapped into, that you haven't tried yet. So it's not a failure, and there's no shame in going back and starting over, looking around for different forms of inspiration, different forms of
Absolutely.
motivation.
Yeah. I mean,
And hit,
well, I'm
I'm go,
sorry. I was gonna say it's okay to quit. If you're going in the wrong direction, stop. Like, quit doing that. Don't be afraid to quit. And like, oh, you quit going that direction. Yeah, it was the wrong direction. You're even worse off if you keep going in the wrong direction because you don't want to be seen as a quitter. Quit the wrong things and try to find and do the right things.
Most definitely. And you know what? Actually, as the fire starts to wind down, I think that's the perfect person for you to speak to for a couple of minutes about somebody who is just realized I'm on the wrong path. I'm gonna quit, but how do I find that new direction to travel? How do I find the new path?
Yeah, a few things. I look at things like this. One, what do you want to do? What are you good at? And where is there a need in the world? Like where do those things overlap? Like what are you good at? What do you want to do? And where does it meet a need in the world? Because if you can find the overlap of those 3 things, you're doing something you're good at, it helps people, and you're enjoying yourself. That's a pretty damn good life if you can align those things. Now, that doesn't mean it won't be without work and struggle and all the rest, but just being able to look at your life and you know go talk to people, go get mentors, um, find somebody who's doing what you want to do, like successfully. Find the most successful person who is doing what you want to do and go get around them. Offer to work for them, volunteer for them, pay them their consulting fee if you need to, or whatever their coaching fee. Get around people who already know how to get where you want to go because anywhere you want to go, somebody's probably already been there, and or a lot of people have, and they know the path better than you.
Mm.
When my mentor taught me speaking, and he helped me out, gosh, I mean, in the first 12 months, I went further than I would have gone in 5 years probably, trying to just figure it out myself, tripping over everything, stepping on the landmines on that whole journey. I mean, it just cuts the learning curve into like 100th. Find people who are good at what you want to do or who are already doing it. And also be open. Be open to advice from people who don't know what it's like to be you. I always say, like in Afghanistan, a lot of people say, or when I got home, and I had this mindset also. If you haven't been in my shoes, don't try to relate to me and try to tell me how like you don't understand, you don't get it. That's all bullshit. Because in Afghanistan, we were a small 17-man infantry platoon, and we lived out in the mountains. And you know what? Sometimes there were enemy forces out there who were superior in number. And we also had these things called close air support. These were pilots in war helicopters and warplanes that were flying over our battlefield. Even though those pilots didn't know what it's like to be boots on the ground, they didn't need to. They could see our battlefield from a different perspective, a different vantage point. They could see danger we couldn't see, and they could see help and resources and advantages we had that we may not have realized if not for them flying above us and looking down and advising us. They didn't have to know what it's like to be in our shoes. The fact that they are not inhibited by our perspective and our view being boots on the ground is what actually allowed them to help us most. And so don't ever that's my biggest thing too is don't ever be closed to advice from anybody. I mean, some people you don't think that person could ever tell you something to help you. The most unlikely person you would ever think might just have one thing they end up saying that just clicks. Something just unlocks in your mind and you go, "Oh my god, that's it." Well, thankfully, if that happens, thankfully, you weren't closed to hearing what that person had to say.
I think that's very valuable because a lot of the time when we decide we're going to hit the reset button, we think we have to deconstruct everything. We have to rebuild the wheel based off of whatever biased opinions we have. If we're willing to open our ears and listen more to many different points, but be willing to evaluate the feedback and put it into play, you get where you're trying to go a lot quicker, a lot easier.
Yeah, the first person to get captured or killed or who's in the most danger on a battlefield is the person who's alone and has no help. And there are a lot of people with that mentality. They don't want to ask for help. It's their ego, whatever. Even primally as a species, I mean, one of the worst death sentences in early humanity was being kicked out of your tribe, sent out like banished into the wilderness because you had no one to help you. It was literally basically a death sentence. And even into today's society, we have people unwilling to ask for help. In other words, there's a village around you. Maybe you don't know exactly who all of them are, but there are people around that can help. But if you're not asking for the help and seeking the advice to get back on top and succeed again, then you're not being banished by the village. You're banishing yourself from the village. And everyone's there with open arms. Most people are happy to help in some way if you have questions or advice, you're struggling with something. Like people can be evil as shit. We are terrible beings, but we're also the most compassionate, loving, and generous um beings. It's like we're both sides of the yin and the yang, man. Like we can be awful, but we can also be the absolute best and even sacrificing ourselves for somebody and giving our lives. And so people all around generally, will be very kind and compassionate to help somebody who's really just if here's what I see. If there's somebody struggling, if two people are struggling the same and one's just complaining about it for a very long time, I'm not very incentivized to help them because they seem to not want to go anywhere. But if I see someone constantly trying to climb out of this pit, they struggle, they're trying to climb out, they make it a little further, then they slide back down, they go, damn it, they get mad, they try it again. Like, I want to help that person. Like that person, like, I want to help that person more than the other person who's just sitting in the pit going, I'm never getting out of this pit, never gonna get out of here. Like, yeah, sitting there not trying to climb, you're not getting out of there. But the person trying, I want to reach my hand down, throw a rope down, and be like, "Hey, I've got you, brother. Like, grab this rope. I will pull you up out of that. I will help you." And it feels good to be somebody who can help. And it also feels good to know, man, like there are people willing to help. But if they don't know, or if you're not trying yourself, it can be hard to make that connection.
It's very true because, like I mentioned, with the isolation factor of my journey, it was very difficult. And now that I've started to open myself up to the resources around me, it's made that journey not only a lot easier, but a lot more fulfilling. And that's something that all of us would really benefit from putting the ego down for just a minute and understanding we have our strengths, but we have our weaknesses too. And there's somebody out there that can help us with those weaknesses, and it's okay to ask.
Yeah, and one of the fears is that people are going to invalidate us or make fun of us or we're going to look bad. But people who can legit help you, people above you, people further beyond than you are, those people almost are never going to trash or or belittle somebody trying to do better. Like really, really successful people, if they see somebody struggling, maybe trying to do what they've already done, it's highly unlikely. I'm not saying there aren't some jerks out there, but it's highly unlikely they're gonna just say, "Oh yeah, look at that guy," just making all these stupid mistakes. And it's like, no, they're gonna go, "Hey man, I see what you're doing here, but if you do it this way instead of that way, it's a lot easier." And the person goes, "Oh my god, I never thought of that." Like people who are really genuinely successful at something, they're often happy to look back and just kind of throw a rope back and say, "You can do it that way, but here's how I did it, or here's how I've seen other people do it, and it might be better for you." And so in that case, like, you don't have to worry about your ego. I think most people who are going to trash you and try and insult your ego or hurt your ego, th- these aren't people who are doing better than you, at least in the way you're trying to do better. Because I know with me, whenever I've succeeded at something, almost my immediate response after succeeding is, "Oh my god, who can I tell about this? And who can I tell and share this with and tell them how I did it?" Because it's fun. It's not to brag about me. It's fun and exciting to teach other people how to do something. That's how I'm wired. And so a lot of other people are that way too. I know if you saw somebody struggling with something you've struggled with in your life, you probably wouldn't badmouth them and go, "Oh man, look at that guy going through all that stuff, not even doing the right thing." No, you'd be like, "Hey man, if you're willing to hear me, I think I can maybe help you out of what you're going through, or at least help you take your next step." That's the total difference.
It totally is, and I do that day in and day out. I'll encounter somebody that is having those same struggles, and it's like, hey, you can work through it. I can, if you want to listen, I can help you get there. And speaking of, you got to let people know as it comes to an end how they can reach out to you, how they can work with you, what you got coming up, all that good stuff.
Yeah, I've been a professional speaker for over 16 years now. I speak for everything from small business conferences to Fortune 500 companies, conventions. And so if you want to learn more about my speaking or book me as a speaker potentially, just go to blownupguy.com. Real easy to remember because I'm a guy and I got blown up. So, Afghanistan, blownupguy.com. But even more important, I would say, because it's even more beneficial to the masses listening here, if you've ever wanted to share your story, make a difference with it, sharing it, maybe getting up, giving a presentation, no matter how long or short, if you want to make a difference sharing your story, but you just don't have any idea where to begin, maybe you're afraid of it, or you think, who would want to hear my story, or how would I even start? How do I, how does one even get into that? Go to useyourstory.com right now, because right there at useyourstory.com, I have what's called the free Share Your Story Roadmap. And what that is, it's a one-page PDF and about a 14-minute video explaining it. I walk you through how to position your story from a place of value and make your first $500 speaking. So if you want to get paid to share your story, there's several ways to do it. If you want to get paid to speak, if you want to go out there and make a difference with your story, go download the Share Your Story roadmap at useyourstory.com. And I do want to say this too. Speaking is not about the money, but there's a lot of money in it. But it's not about the money. That's why I say, like with the $500, that's something easily doable if somebody will follow what I teach them in this free resource. But here's why it's important. It's extremely important to be able to be financially productive with what you do, especially if it's something like speaking, sharing your story, because you won't be able to reach as many people or help as many people, or even keep doing it if you can't be financially productive. So that's why, I mean, some people, they can't fathom making $5,000 giving a speech. I've been paid that so many times I can't even count, and more than that, because I've been doing this so long. But 500 is doable for anybody, and I break down exactly how to do that in that free resource, that free Share Your Story roadmap at useyourstory.com.
Sweet. I'll make sure to link to that in the show notes. But for now, as Wire winds down, I don't believe in goodbyes. So until we meet again, whether it's this life or the next, I wish you a safe and prosperous journey.
Hey, let's have a campfire, brother.
Oh, most definitely. We'll definitely put that together soon.